I'm Alan Goldblatt.
I'm Leslie Aspen.
I'm Nancy Griffith.
And I'm Tommy Cavlin. And we'd like to thank the Association for Baha'i Studies for inviting us to present the story behind the podcast we're creating about the Baha'i faith and hope. We call it The Podacity of Hope.
It's a story that began in Los Angeles over 40 years ago, when we were part of a group of young media professionals who came together to create a Baha'i television talk show. It was called The Spiritual Revolution, and it ran on over 100 public access channels, as well as some over-the-air TV stations in North America. We produced 26 episodes of The Spiritual Revolution, and it was hosted by Sharon Baldoni and the late John Cavlin. We covered topics ranging from life after death to progressive revelation, American Indian prophecy, oneness of God.
Guests included Judge James Nelson, actor Alex Rocco, educator Daniel Jordan, singer Dash Crofts, composer Russell Garcia, and many, many more.
During that same period, we produced 26 episodes of a Spanish language series, which I hosted, titled Crece con Nosotros, Grow with Us. Guests included counselors Raul Pavon, Carmen de Burafato, indigenous believers, performing artists, and scholars from all over the Baha'i Spanish-speaking world. And if that weren't enough, we also produced 13 Chinese language programs. What happened next? Life happened. We went our separate ways. Marriages, families, kids, careers. I moved to Puerto Rico, pioneering. Others went to Seattle, New York, Oregon, even Japan.
Then, in 2020, as the whole world was engulfed by the COVID pandemic, some of us who were involved in the original shows reunited, thanks to Zoom. Although the impetus was to find out the whereabouts of those old programs, we grew curious about what would happen if we applied what we'd learned over the past 4 decades to new media.
We discussed reviving the old Spiritual Revolution format, updating episodes, making YouTube videos. We didn't get as far as making TikTok videos, thank goodness, because Leslie discovered an old envelope.
And inside that envelope was a proposal that Alan and I wrote for a television series to be shot in 1983 about Baha'is and hope. The premise was that people feel hopeless about so many issues, yet the Baha'is are hopeful. Why is that?
Reading from that original proposal, it is apparent that we are living in a time of great chaos and confusion, a time in which the values we have held so dear seem to be crumbling. Governmental institutions can no longer deliver what they promise. Established religions are not capable of providing the answers we seek for solace. Our streets don't feel safe. The prevailing sense is one of fear as our world reels out of control. The proposal went on to say, Baha'is know that a time of fear and confusion is really a time of hope. In fact, one of the great realities of the faith is its ability to transform the fears which divide us and thereby create the unity that can come only from hope. There are alternatives, there are other possibilities, there is a way out. The search for truth hasn't ended. In fact, it's only now beginning.
That 40-year-old proposal outlined several episodes on such topics as racism, the family, the economy, and education. It even featured the secret sauce that lives on in our current project. What happens when the discourse meets the grassroots? More on that later. But so we knew what we wanted to do, something about hope. But what form would it take? Another TV talk show? Series of videos? And then it struck us, a podcast.
In considering the best way to present the topic of hope in 2022, we agreed that a TV series, with its attendant costs and complexity, was not the way to go. More in keeping with the contemporary media landscape is a podcast. For one thing, audio is far simpler to produce than video. For another, podcasts have become extremely popular. Podcasts are simple to distribute, and because they can be streamed whenever you want, you don't have to make an appointment to hear an episode. Plus, a podcast requires just one sense, your ears. along with your mind.
So the decision was made to produce a podcast about hope, the Podacity of Hope. As Baha'u'llah wrote, set all thy hope in God and cleave tenaciously to his unfailing mercy.
We were also guided by the 25 November 2020 letter from the Universal House of Justice, in which hope plays a prominent role. Excerpting from that message, your resilience and unwavering commitment to the well-being of those around you, persistent through all difficulties, have filled us with tremendous hope. But it is no wonder that in some quarters, hope has become a depleted resource. The decades ahead are set to bring with them challenges among the most daunting that the human family has ever had to face. Your efforts to succor and support one another, as well as your sisters and brothers in society at large, will certainly need to be sustained and in some places expanded.
The House added, may you succeed in giving hope to those who know not where to find it in a world disoriented and adrift, sorely lacking the unity you, through your heart-pledged devotion to the covenant, so conspicuously manifest.
In preparing for our podcast, The Podacity of Hope, we also studied the latest hope research, including hope theory. Hope theory, as defined by University of Kansas researcher C.R. Snyder, is the perceived capacity to derive pathways to desired goals and motivate oneself via agency thinking to use those pathways. In the early 2000s, when I was creative director at the Charles and Helen Schwab Foundation, my colleague Malcolm Margalit, former dean of education at Tel Aviv University, applied hope theory to children with learning disabilities. In her paper with Orly Idan, titled Hope Theory in Education Systems, they wrote, hope enables children to set valued goals, to see the means to achieve these goals, and to find the drive to make these goals happen. Hope can be taught.
The American Psychological Association defines hope as the expectation that one will have positive experiences, or that a potentially threatening or negative situation will not materialize, or will ultimately result in a favorable state of affairs. Last year, an article titled The Psychology of Hope in Psychology Today magazine reported that hopeful people not only feel better, but they have measurably higher levels of achievement and even better health. Why? Because they are forward-looking. Hope can help us adapt even when everything we've taken for granted about our lives has been disrupted, such as by the pandemic.
And we were inspired by what Václav Havel wrote about hope. Hope is an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. Or, as Abdul Baha said, man is under all conditions immersed in a sea of God's blessings. Therefore, be thou not hopeless under any circumstances, but rather be firm in thy hope.
Our hunch that the seemingly insurmountable challenges facing us are really opportunities in disguise truly gained credence at the 2020 ABS conference. At a panel titled The Social and Spiritual Implications of the Pandemic, we heard from Dr. Moishgan Sami, a public health professor at California State University, Fullerton. She noted pandemics such as COVID-19 do not cause inequities and injustices. Instead, they exacerbate and lay bare the existing deficiencies in the structures of society that prevent unity, peace, justice, equity, and health.
And just as the flowering of civilization known as the Renaissance grew out of the Black Plague, the pandemic can expose openings for positive change in health equity, the environment, planetary consciousness, and more. In the pilot episode of the Podacity of Hope, we spoke with Moishgan about her ABS talk and our reaction to it.
I'm so glad it sat well. I really worked on that aspect of it to try taking the broad strokes that we look at when we think of history and where we are in the moment in relationship to the historic kind of movement towards the unification of the entire human race. It gives you such a different perspective. And then if you're someone who's well kind of versed in the scientific and social discourses and the scientific studies around infectious disease control, it's like I had such a different perspective in how I lecture and how I talk to my students about the pandemic. It really shifted things. Like we talked about the foundation of what caused the pandemic outside of the example of being in China and having a virus kind of jump from one species to another. Like that was important to understand. But thinking about how did we get here? And then thinking back to the other pandemic of the bubonic plague 600-700 years ago, and how we really created a system, not very intentionally, that caused the coronavirus pandemic today. It's like you can't divorce it from that 700-year arc of our relationship with the planet and each other. You can't divorce it. So now we have the first time in history where we can actually deliberately and intentionally set the foundation of a new system. That to me was just mind-boggling.
It's as if the pandemic were asking us to broaden our horizons, to think more about we than me.
And it's like everything that we can think of that we need to change and transform, whether it's our relationship to the planet, to each other, to the concept of national sovereignty. A virus doesn't respect borders. How are we working together? And the fact that the World Health Organization constantly and consistently is saying we need science and solidarity to move forward. And then they conclude with we have science. It's the solidarity that's missing for us to truly eradicate or eliminate this transmission risk. So that's where it kind of, I was like, wow, we have this opportunity. Let's not waste it.
Baha'u'llah said, "A different cause hath appeared in this day, and a different discourse is required." In the Podacity of Hope, we're focused on what happens when Baha'i-inspired discourse meets the grassroots. For example, Mojgan opened us up to the opportunities presented by the pandemic. At the grassroots, in the arts, performers were discovering new ways to reach audiences. Among them, Justice Batesall and Robin Campbell of Seattle's Splinter Dance Company.
I think, well, personally, it was just a sudden shift in everything, right? I mean, you're kind of figuring out how to juggle and how to navigate the things that you have to do, your day job, if you still have one. I know that affected a lot of people, and then just within the arts, with stages going dark, we suddenly didn't have the ability to create art in the studio with our dancers like we had been for years prior. So we just had to kind of shift and juggle and figure out. I mean, I'm just thinking personally, it was stressful trying to get back into some kind of norm, but at the same time, it was exciting because there was so much change happening and so many opportunities for growth and learning and jumping into new opportunities.
When all the stages went dark and studios closed, we had to pivot quickly. And in order to do that, we had to think of another medium that we could get dance across and performance across to our audiences and still be active. And so the way that we thought about that was, okay, let's create videos. Let's put this into a video format. And we knew that once we went video, that we were able to reach a larger audience than we would have just trying to get people to buy tickets to a show. So I think that pivot to really capturing dance on video and getting it out and accessible to the greater public was a big shift.
Our second Podacity of Hope podcast focuses on virtues. We spoke with my sister, Linda Kavalin Popov, co-founder of the Virtues Project. It's a global initiative inspiring the practice of virtues in everyday life, and was recognized by the United Nations as a model global program for families of all cultures. It feels a growing need for children to discover virtues at a time when moral education may not be as accessible as it once was.
And when we started this project, we realized that there was a failure of hope for so many of our children. Otherwise, why are they committing suicide? Why are they committing senseless murders? That violence vacuum was created such a vacuum, or maybe came from a vacuum of hope, a vacuum of virtues. So that was really a big motivator when we started the project. And many people, want to know what is a virtue. And a virtue, the actual name, the word, comes from power, strength. A virtue, I think the best definition, to be honest, came from a 6-year-old in an audience one time when I asked people, raise your hand if you know what a virtue is. And this was a mixed age audience. And this little 6-year-old raises her hand and she says, virtues are what's good about us.
Very perceptive, because we're born with virtues. And a program like the Virtues Project unlocks those virtues within you.
You got it. That's exactly what the Virtues Project is for. How do you bring the virtues to life? How do you ignite them in a child? Because virtue is not taught so much as it is caught. When a parent or a teacher or an elder models a virtue, is kind to a child, they're teaching them kindness. They can also have the power of language, which shapes character. The words we hear about ourselves shape our identity when we're little.
As we said earlier, the Podacity of Hope is all about what happens when the discourse meets the grassroots. So we paid a virtual visit to Lucknow, India, home of CMS, the City Montessori School. It's the largest such school in the world, over 50,000 students. In addition to a rigorous curriculum, CMS emphasizes the virtues. Dara Feldman of Virtues Matter talked about introducing the Virtues Project just before the beginning of COVID.
So the Virtues Project is relatively new to CMS, and I'll share from the educators' perspectives in our well-being circles, Virtues Connection Well-being Circles online. The families were there, right? It was COVID. So the teachers' families were present when they were doing their sharing circles. And they would even say, oh, I really love when you participate in these virtue circles because you're peaceful, you're calmer, we see you so joyful. And so it spread and trickled into the educators' homes. And then the educators were then using the virtues and the strategies with their students online, again, with parents around, and the parents wanted to participate. So there ended up being family and community circles.
We also spoke with Sejal and Kushi, who are animators at the school's burgeoning Junior Youth Empowerment Program.
Most of the time, the most important thing is that you have to do service in this age, that is the youth. You don't have to wait for your whole life to end, then being an old age, and then when you have money and everything, then you will do service. So both service and focusing on your career and everything, these both the things go hand in hand. Not one thing can wait. I think that being in CMS and being a part of this program has taught me one thing, that life has purpose. And I think I found my purpose, which is like we can serve it by doing anything, literally anything. I can pursue my career and at the same time I can serve, which is like beautiful. And being with junior youth, it's like it improved my confidence, it improved my communication skills. I was a really, really nervous kid. I had so many anxieties and everything, but then being with animators and then slowly getting involved in all these activities has made me like really confident and has improved a lot. I can literally see the change in my personality over the years.
We truly believe that the art of audio, as expressed through our podcast, will help untold listeners discover the hope unleashed through Baha'u'llah's revelation. As the Universal House of Justice affirmed in its 30 December 2021 message, indeed, the arts as a whole, so integral a part of the development of a community from the start, stand out in such settings as an important means of generating joy, strengthening bonds of unity, disseminating knowledge and consolidating understanding, as well as of acquainting those in the wider society with the principles of the cause.
And naturally, they affirmed, there remains a strong focus on being outward looking, finding ways to continually share the fruits of a thriving pattern of action with souls who are as yet unfamiliar with the faith. Thanks once again to the Association for Baha'i Studies and to you for spending some time with us. Look for episodes of The Pedacity of Hope coming this fall, wherever you get your podcasts.